Well, good morning. If I have not had a chance to meet you between the Bible class and worship or before, I certainly want to do that as soon as the service is over in just a few moments. We're glad you're here. If you're visiting here, we're just happy to have you. I tell you that you're among some friendly people and that they will endear themselves to you. And we're glad to have you a part of our service. It's just a joy to be here in Cabot, Arkansas, and to worship with all of you. Look forward to the week ahead, and there'll be more time available later to share some more personal things, but just suffice it to say that I'm excited to be here. I hope you are looking forward to our time together as well. Turn to the book of Exodus, and the 3rd chapter. And we're going to read about a scene that every child here has studied about in Bible class, and a scene that we all know very, very well. It's that scene where Moses sees a bush that's on fire and doesn't burn up. Exodus 3, beginning in verse 1. Now Moses was pasturing the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. The angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush was burning with fire, and yet the bush was not consumed. So Moses said, I must turn aside and see this marvelous sight, why the bush is not burned up. When the Lord saw that he turned aside to look, God called to him from the middle of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here I am. Then he said, Do not come near. Remove your sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. And he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. And then Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. The Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and I have given heed to their cry because of their taskmasters, for I am aware of their sufferings. So I have come down to deliver them. Skip down to verse 10. Therefore, come now, and I will send you to Pharaoh, so that you may bring my people, the sons of Israel, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, Who am I, that I should go to Pharaoh and that I should bring the sons of Israel out of Egypt? And he said, Certainly I will be with you. Verse 13. Then Moses said to God, Behold, I am going to the sons of Israel, and I will say to them, The God of your fathers has sent me to you. And they will say to me, What is his name? What shall I say to them? And God said to Moses, I am who I am. And he said, Thus you shall say to the sons of Israel, I am has sent me to you. We'll stop there. Sadly, some of us are bored. It's not that we don't have anything to do. All of us have stuff to do. But then again, ladies and gentlemen, boredom is not defined by a lack of busyness. Boredom is defined by a lack of life mission. Boredom is defined by a lack of life purpose. You can have plenty to do and still be bored. I think that's why the video gaming industry is so big. And people get addicted to those things. And yet on the positive side, video games do give us a goal. They do give a mission, a mini mission, M-I-N-I, but a mission nonetheless. But when you play a video game, it is a mission without any risk. So I can become a race car driver. I can become an assassin. I can become a fighter pilot. I can become an angry bird. And there's no risk to me. There's no real threat to my well-being. There's no real adventure. It's 100% pure entertainment. Entertainment. In 1951, there was a guy by the name of Ray Bradbury who wrote a book called Fahrenheit 451. I had to read that book in high school, and a lot of people my age had to read that book in high school. And in the book Fahrenheit 451, written in 1951, it was a book that previewed the future. And in that book, Bradbury writes about this futuristic 21st century society in which everybody would become obsessed with entertainment. In fact, in Bradbury's book written in 1951, he talks about how that in this futuristic 21st century society, the walls of the people's homes would be the size, or the televisions would be the size of the walls of the home. And everybody laughed because everybody knows that'll never happen, you know. So he writes this book about this futuristic society in which people are obsessed with entertainment. And yet in the book, nobody's happy. People just sort of exist. It's like something is about to destroy them, and no one looks up from their entertainment devices long enough to even notice. So I tell you what, let's do. Let's fast forward from 1951. Let's fast forward 71 years. And we have televisions the size of our walls, right? And people binge on entertainment. And we carry movies in our pockets. And we carry music in our pockets. And there's not a second of a day that goes by, if we don't want to, that we can't be entertained. And yet, some people are still bored. Now, if you're bored, you need something that no Netflix series is going to fix. No video game is going to solve for you. No addictive application on your phone. No social media. None of that. What you need in life, what all of us need in life, is a mission. We need a purpose for living. Something that is real. Something that I can pour myself into that is bigger than I am. Something about which I'm not simply observing something on a screen. I'm a participant. And I'm not just playing a game, I'm in the game. And it's not a game. It's real life. Do you understand you're here for a reason? That you're created for a purpose? God's purpose? But before you can find your purpose, you have to see what Moses saw. You have to see that the God you serve is not boring. And so it is that the great I Am presented himself to Moses as the God of the fire. If you're taking notes this morning, I want you to just write down 1, 2, 3. I'm just going to give you 3 things. 3 things. And everybody's thinking, ooh, good, short sermon. Woo, okay. 3 things. 3 ways God is like fire from this passage. Number 1, write this down. Like fire is both dangerous and attractive. So is the holiness of God. I'll say it again. Like fire is both dangerous and attractive, so is the holiness of God. When you see fire, you are drawn to it. Fire has a way of grabbing your attention and pulling you in. And yet you understand that if I get too close to the fire, I'll get burned. So in fire, you have something that is attractive and dangerous. Like God. Now, in Exodus, the 3rd chapter, Moses was busy. Moses, like you and me, Moses had stuff to do. But what Moses lacked was mission and purpose. He had a job. He was a sheep herder. He had a responsibility to fulfill. Sheep herding is not exactly an 8 to 5, 5 day a week, I'm going to clock in and clock out kind of job. So Moses did not lack for something to do. Moses had plenty to do. But Moses lacked mission. Moses lacked what a lot of us lack sometimes, and that's purpose. So in verse 2 of the text that we read, the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the middle of a bush. And Moses looked, and the bush was burning, but not consumed. So the fire catches his eye. Moses turns aside to investigate, and in verse 4, when the Lord saw that he turned aside, God called to him from the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, here I am. And then God said, don't come near. Remove your sandals, for you're standing on holy ground. The fire catches his attention, and as Moses began to draw near to the fire and get closer, the voice came out of the fire and said, stop. Don't come any closer. In fact, take off your shoes, because you're standing on holy ground. Let's start there with the holy ground part. We struggle with the word holy sometimes, because when we hear the word holy, sometimes we think pretentious. You heard somebody say, oh, she thinks she's holier than thou. You've heard that? That's not what this is. God is a different kind of holy. God is a set-apart kind of holy, which is the core definition of holiness itself. So rather than being holier than thou, God is, as we sing, holy art thou, because holiness is who He is. Holiness is His character. Holiness is His nature. As the New Testament writer says, we serve a God who is a consuming fire. Consuming fire. What happens when you throw something into the fire? The fire consumes it. The fire burns it up. The fire melts it. The fire turns it to ashes. And that's why, as Moses begins to walk nearer the fire, God says, stop. Don't come any closer. Because a combination of God's holy fire and your unholy sin will kill you. Will kill you. Anybody been to the Grand Canyon? Nobody goes to the Grand Canyon and gets out of the car and stays in the parking lot and looks at the Grand Canyon from the parking lot and says, I think I see it over there. Nobody does that. You get out of the car in the parking lot and you walk to the edge. But as you walk to the edge, you begin to realize there's no fence. There's no guardrail. They just put up a sign that says, warning, do not go past this point. And all the parents and grandparents are grabbing their kiddos because they're all of a sudden realize, oh, let's keep Johnny and Susie close. You know, it's a long way down there. I love the story of the little girl. The parents are taking the little girl across the United States on a trip, and they gave their daughter a journal, and they said, as we travel across the United States, we're going to see all kinds of historical places, all kinds of natural places. Write down stuff so you'll remember. And so they go across the United States. She never wrote down a word. Day after day after day, she never wrote anything until they got to the Grand Canyon. And she gets to the Grand Canyon, and she runs back, and she grabs her journal, and she writes down as fast as she could. And that night when she went to bed, the parents' curiosity, when she went to sleep, they opened the journal, and this is what it said. Today, I spitted a mile. So, when you go to the Grand Canyon, you might try that. I don't know. My point is, the Grand Canyon, what is beautiful, what is attractive, is also dangerous, and so you have to respect it. It's the same with God. Moses is staring at the fire, mesmerized by the fire, but he can't go in. Because what is beautiful is also deadly. That's why there can be no such thing as a bored Christian. How can that be? God is too attractive and dangerous to ever be boring. The problem is our faces get planted in screen world that we fail to notice His world, or our faces get planted in entertainment world that we fail to spend enough time in His Word. And we don't develop the relationship with Him that we should have. We miss that connection. Now here's the problem. When you lose sense of who God is, you lose sense of who you are. And when you lose sense of who you are, you start remaking God in your image. And when you remake God in your image, watch what happens. God gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and you get bigger and bigger and bigger. And then you get perturbed. Because God's not running things the way you think it ought to be run. And rather than being grateful, we become entitled. And we start thinking it's all about us. It's not all about us. It's all about Him. You go to the Grand Canyon and you get all these people standing there, and they're peering over into the canyon. They're looking at it, and they're oohing and they're eyeing. I tell you what, here's an experiment. Step in front of those people and turn and face them. Face all of those people who are looking at the Grand Canyon and say to them, stop looking at the Grand Canyon. Everybody look at me and look how awesome I am. And they're going to look at you like you're an idiot. Because you'd be an idiot. Nobody goes to the Grand Canyon to look at you. They go to the Grand Canyon to look at the Grand Canyon. That's the way that works. It's not about you. It's about God. You ever been to the zoo? What do you want to see when you go to the zoo? I tell you what, next time you go to the zoo, find the zookeeper and say, where's the dachshund exhibit? You know the little dogs? Where's the dachshund exhibit? And the zookeeper's going to look at you like you've lost your mind. They don't have a dachshund exhibit. We don't go to the zoo to see the dachshunds. We go to the zoo to see lions and tigers and bears. Why? Because lions and tigers and bears can rip your face off. That's why we go see lions and tigers and bears. But we don't want to get too close. We want to see them from a distance because we respect their power. What is attractive to us can also be dangerous. And you know, across the world today, people gather in assemblies like this, and I wonder how many of us show up out of rut and routine because we're just here to see the dachshund exhibit. When we are actually here to worship a God who is attractive, wholly attractive, and wholly dangerous. This is the one who made the sun, this ball of fire, so bright in the sky, you can't even look at it without looking away. And that same God who put that ball of fire in the sky seeks to light a fire in you and in me. Don't we sing about that sometimes? Light the fire in my heart today. Like fire is both attractive and dangerous, so is God. Respect Him. Secondly, like fire is intimate. Like fire is intimate, so is the love of God. You ever sat around a campfire? A campfire draws you in. When you build a campfire, there's a sense of coziness. There's a sense of warmth and intimacy. When I think campfire, I think of friends and s'mores. Somebody asked me how many children we have, and I have to count them up. 7. We have 4 of our own, and they're all grown and married, gone. And then my wife and I looked at our house and we said, what are we going to do with this house? And so we filled it back up again. We adopted 3 children from Eastern Europe, 3 teenagers from Eastern Europe. Brought them to America, and they didn't know any English when they got off the plane. And they're now all out of the house too. So we're empty nesters again. But I remember they hadn't been at home about a week or so, and I said, I went out and built a campfire out back in the fire ring, and I said, we're going to make s'mores. And they looked at each other, and they looked at me, and they said, some more of what? I said, s'mores. Well, they had no idea what that was. But I will tell you, after they ate one, they wanted another one, and another one. And you know, it was really interesting to take kids who don't know any English and to teach them a language that has to be very hard to learn, that we take for granted all the time. I remember we're sitting around the table one evening for supper, and Leah, who was 16 later on, she was 16, and she was dating a boy from church. They eventually got married. But anyway, they just started dating. We're sitting around having supper, and Jacob was over the house. And Leah just blurts out and she says, I'm feeling frisky. You ought to have seen Jacob's face. He got all red in the face. And I said, you're feeling what? She said, I'm feeling frisky. I said, do you know what that means? She said, yeah, I think it means happy. I said, well, yeah, but with a little twist that maybe you don't understand. How would you like to learn English? It would be very, very difficult, you know? So we're sitting around the campfire. The same campfire that warms you, that gives you comfort, can also kill you. So you got to be careful. Here's the problem with God. God's not going to turn down the heat of His holiness so you can come to Him. That's not going to happen. Because His holiness is who He is. God's not going to make His fire less hot. So how's this going to work? Because I want to come to God. How's this going to work? God doesn't change Himself. God changes you. He makes a way for you to come to the fire without getting burned. And it's been in this passage the whole time. And like one day I looked at this and all of a sudden the light bulb came on. I want you to look closely at verse 7 and verse 8 of Exodus 3. The Lord said, I have seen the affliction of my people in Egypt, and I've given heed to their cry because of their taskmasters, for I am aware of their sufferings. So I have come down to deliver them. You know, the ultimate coming down would not happen for centuries. The ultimate coming down would happen when Jesus came. God coming down. John 1 and verse 1, in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. I am coming down. And the same God who said to Moses, you say, I am has sent me to you, is the words of Jesus. Unless you believe that I am, you will die in your sins. Jesus said, I am the I am. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me. The only way I can come into the fire of God's holiness and not be burned is by His holiness, not mine. Because He took death for me. He was burned for me. He died for me. Why? So that I can become the righteousness of God in Him. God takes sin so seriously that the only way you can come into the presence of His holiness is by His holiness. And the I am offers cleansing. The I am offers forgiveness. The I am offers holy, purifying. And when that happens, in a sense, He in turn sets you on fire. And in a sense, you become His bush that doesn't burn up. Not because of you, but because of Him. Like fire is intimate, so is the love of God. And finally, like fire fuels motion, so is the power of God. Your car cannot move without power. Your car has to have fuel, has to have a fuel source and a spark plug. And when the fuel hits the spark of that plug, there is literally an explosion. And when there is this explosion, then and only then can you have motion. Explosion, motion. It was the same with Moses. Moses just going through the motions, rutting the routine, running on empty, until God filled his tank and sparked his mission. And when that happened, there was explosion, motion. And when God finally got him where he needed to be, God said, now you go to Egypt and bring my people home. Nothing explodes until it's lit. And God lit him up. And God can light you up. Because once you see the fire of God's holiness and you are consumed with the fire of God's love, then the fire of his purpose will explode in your heart. In the passage read moments ago in Luke chapter 24, those two men had been talking with Jesus, didn't realize it was Jesus at the time, and then later they did, and they said, were not our hearts burning within us when he talked to us? Or the day of Pentecost in Acts 2, tongues as a fire came upon the apostles and they spoke in other tongues. And then God's fire lit them up and they went out and turned the world upside down. So my question as we close this morning is, are you on fire? Or are you just kind of going through the motions? You know, we talk about God has saved us from something. God has saved us from sin. That's not the end of it. God doesn't just save you from something. God saves you to something. Because we're the church of Jesus Christ. We're supposed to be a bunch of people set on fire. We're supposed to be on fire. Are we? Or have we become lazy? If there's no fire, there's no mission. If there's no mission, there's no church. And all that's left is a group of people who show up on a Sunday and they sing about a fire they wish they had or they used to have. We need to be praying, God, light us up. Light us up so that we can set the world on fire. Because we're not here to be entertained. We're not here to keep our heads locked on some kind of screen. We're not here to be amused. We have mission. We have purpose. Go. Go. There's explosion motion. Go. And make disciples of all the nations. Because I'll tell you, if you're bored, you haven't walked close enough to the fire. I love that passage of Moses and the burning bush. And how many times do we read it and think we know it, and we've never really seen the application for us? You know, in some ways, the last 2 or 3 years has taken the fire out of a lot of us. And we've got to quit using that as an excuse. And we've got to get back to the passion and to the energy and to the enthusiasm and to the fire of what it means to be a Christian. And we can do that. But we have to make sure we decide to do that. May we take the principles of this lesson in Exodus chapter 3 and see it live in our own lives. And may God light us up to make a difference in this world. We sing the song of invitation. If you're not a child of His, why don't you obey the gospel and become a Christian and be baptized for the remission of your sins per His instructions? and be enthused about that, because there's nothing that enthuses older Christians more than seeing the enthusiasm of new Christians who are on fire for Jesus. Can we help you this morning? Won't you come while we stand and sing together?